Hello all and welcome to Scorcher Toys at Anymoon.com's closer look at KitzConcept's VF-1J Rick Hunter Custom from their 1/72 scale KC collectible VF-1 line. This is the line's fourth release, only the second regular release, but it's also a substantial retooling. In fact, so much of this toy is different from the first releases, I wasn't sure if I should treat this as a new toy rather than a repaint. Since KitzConcept didn't go gung-ho with a version 2 splattered all over the box, I'm going to call this version 1.5, and we'll spend this video going over all of the differences from the first releases. This toy is currently available for pre-order at Big Bad Toy Store, so click my link in the comments below and search for Robotech to find this and a host of other toys vying for your attention. The upgrades begin with the packaging, which is a hair smaller but includes essentially the same stuff. The outer shipper box is plain but looks decent enough, and inside you'll find a full retail package with custom art and a window that shows off the goods within. Inside you'll find the VF-1 as well as a gun, a strap for the gun, side cavity fillers for Battloid mode, intake fan covers for Battloid mode or space use, 4 sets of TV style missiles, 3 sets of fixed post hands. The next tray includes a clear display stand and 4 batteries for the light up gimmicks. Beneath it all, you'll find a baggie of instructions, and I've put a full scan of those instructions up on Anymoon.com. We'll begin in fighter mode so we can end this journey on a more positive note. So much of this toy has changed that even the dimensions are different. In fighter mode, the difference is small enough to ignore. As you can see, the toy is well beyond 1/72 scale, but still visually smaller than the Arcadia toy. Moving to a profile shot, there are a few big takeaways. First, the feet are no longer optimized for Battloid. We'll discuss those more in a bit here. The knees look cleaner. There are some gaps near the intakes, and the new intakes are much larger. I think many people will appreciate that KitzConcept reduced the front trapezoids along that chest's leading edge. The neck has been tweaked so that the head can be tucked in a little bit better on the nose cone. It's not as snug as we would see on a Bandai DX or Arcadia toy, but it is improved from version 1. Here you can see the paint on this toy easily competes with or surpasses the more expensive competition, but there are a few more gaps to contend with. Switching to a forward shot, you can see that the height of these toys when the landing gear are deployed hasn't changed, and we'll talk about the issues that causes in just a moment. You can also get a sense for how much those new hips are optimized for Battloid. The gun is essentially the same as the previous release. The only thing that has changed is the shape of the nub on the front here. You can see it's a little thicker on version 1 toys. I'm sure that was KitzConcept's effort to make this snug in a little tighter under the belly of fighter mode. To get this ready to be in fighter mode, you have to remove the handle, which obviously not ideal when compared to like a DX toy or an Arcadia toy. And then you can just collapse it like so. And then you have your switch for the light effect right up underneath there. Same as version 1. Same way of installing the batteries right here by taking that screw out and plugging 2 in. This is a version 1.0 toy. It has the same light effect that we see on the version 1.5 toy, but in order to access the switch, you had to pull the nose cone off the plane, and here's the switch here. Batteries were located underneath with a screw here. You take that screw out, access the battery bay. On version 1.5 toys, you don't have that same mechanism. Instead, now we get a place where we could squeeze a fingernail in there, lift up a trap door. There's the battery bay. There's the switch right there. We can just close that up. Now this whole door is removable, and if you are really sure you're done for a while and you want to press this totally flat, it does become very difficult to open. You're really gonna have to pry it open, but they did give you a little notch there. Some people might have a little easier time of it than others. Then you've got the lights on. Now, one problem I did experience on both of these toys, unfortunately, is that the canopy glass does an awful job of staying shut when the toy is upside down, which you might not think is that bad, but that's why there's no pilot in there right now, because then the pilot just goes spilling out. On this toy, it does a little bit better job, but it still pops open a little too frequently on me. So I would like to see those fit in just a little bit tighter so it doesn't happen as often. So here we have the lights on. You can see Rick in there piloting his vehicle, which looks pretty good. Now there is some light bleed happening. There's some red in the front, in case you didn't notice those little red sensors up front, and some blue coming through the landing gear. But I don't think most people are going to be showing off the bottom of their toy when they have the lights on, so hopefully not a big deal for most people. Then you have your gun, which has the switch underneath here. It lights up. You can see that light shining bright. It also comes through the top. There's the barrel. If you've ever installed a gun on a VF-1 toy, you're familiar with how this works. It just plugs in between, sits down like so. Now here's an issue I brought up on the version 1 toy that's not addressed yet, and that is the switch for the gun is underneath in fighter mode, and you can't really access it. So in order to turn that off now, I would have to remove the gun and put it back on again, which isn't a big deal, but just something a little bit funky. It'd be nice if the switch were somewhere a little more accessible. The toy has the exact same landing gear as the version 1.0 toy does. I had a really hard time with my front landing gear bay. It is very, very stiff, so I had to resort to needle nose pliers to get that thing out. Beyond that, they do have spinning wheels. They are very plain looking. And the bigger problem, as you can see, is when you put the gun on the toy, there's not enough clearance. The toy is still sitting on top of that gun with the landing gear barely touching the ground. So there's still some room for improvement here in that regard. The first version 1 toy came with a neon green display stand. Feedback was pretty universal that that was a poor decision, so KitzConcept has since been giving us clear display stands. You can see the version 1.5 display stand has a slightly reshaped front. And what that does for us is it makes it so the toy sits on there a little more flat, but you can see this toy is not rock solid on there. Maybe I could clasp it a little tighter. But this is a display stand that feels like a freebie thing and only works for fighter mode, only has the tilt up and down functionality and the ability to twist at the base. So that's all you're getting out of it. Does lift the toy off the ground, does let you get that gun on there without dealing with the landing gear and the awkwardness of it sitting right on top of the gun. So in those respects, it's a win. Fighter mode is much better to handle on version 1.5 toys than version 1.0. Not that version 1.0 was terrible. You do have better latching intakes, so that's nice. It feels more solid throughout. Still have the pegs that go into the back, the pegs that go into the backpack, so that's all very stable. We can bring these wings back like so. We do have a peg that goes from the nose cone into the chest, and on my version 1 toy, as you might have seen already, there's like no grip there at all. It's very, very annoying. On my version 1.5 toy, that is rock solid. So huge improvement there. The vertical stabilizer is also less frequently askew as I handle the vehicle. And then as we flip the toy over, we have these hard points, which on version 1 toys had a very bad propensity to pop off every time you took the missile off. And on version 1.5 toys, I can get that missile on there nice and secure. I can twist it. I can bring it off. Nothing happening. That did not fall off. I am thrilled. Let's continue on to Guardian mode and check that out. I pointed out in fighter mode that the feet are no longer optimized for Battloid mode. And what I meant by that, as we take a look at this version 1 toy, just lean that forward here, is that there's this big lip on this foot. When it was closed all the way, there was still a little bit of a gap in the middle. But one of the things it does is it does extend out nicely from inside, and then it's ratcheted, which in Gearwalk mode is actually very helpful because you can bring the foot with the toe as far forward as you want, and it will hold that position pretty well. The other thing that you'll notice about the foot is that there was a split exhaust vent. They did give some nice central detail to make it look okay when it's all the way open, but things are a little bit different this time around. Now the foot has lost the big lip. It does close very nicely. The does come out similarly. It's no longer ratcheted though, and that can create some issues in Guardian mode. The interior exhaust vents are one piece now. They don't split open and close, which is nice. Still a nice metal foot. There's also now a little bit of rock back and forth, which was not on the version 1 toy. So an articulation increase there, but in Guardian mode in particular, the feet are actually a little problematic now because they've lost that ratcheting. So you can get things like the toy leaning forward. Now it's not always a problem, and you can sometimes counteract it by just closing the toe a little bit, but it's not entirely ideal. So we're still optimized now for either Battloid or fighter mode, with Guardian mode falling somewhere in between. On version 1 toys, the wing and the shoulder try to occupy the same territory, and you end up with a shoulder that doesn't have the range of motion it should if you bring the wing all the way forward, or you have to leave that wing further back to get the shoulder motion that you probably would want for, let's say, like bringing the gun forward or something like that. I've lost a clear plastic piece. That's a pretty common problem on VF1 toys. On version 1.5, KitzConcept has definitely addressed this issue. So here you can see the wing is all the way open and the shoulder is underneath and can actually move without any issue. And they've done that in a pretty novel way. They've included a hinge underneath the shoulder that allows you to bring the shoulder way down, and then you can do whatever you want. So you've got this new pivot point that gains you a whole lot of articulation there. And if you're like, but that might look a little bit ugly, you can certainly close that up and really reduce the ability to even see it. So it's not a big deal if you're a stickler for having that shoulder in tight to the body. But if you want to play with this thing, you have a whole lot of new options. Though still not perfect, KitzConcept did a lot of work on the intake attachment here. So you can see they're big intakes, but they also attach in a brand new way. So there is a peg in the front, which there it is, and there is a hook on the side. Now the hook on the side is similar to what version 1 toys have, but it's much more pronounced. The peg on top is either new or better shaped. There used to be a peg on the front edge that would go into this housing. They've gotten rid of it entirely, and I'm not sure that was the answer too, because it's still fairly easy to pop these intakes free. So you can see if I want to put this back on, I gotta first pivot it in and then push it in. Now when this toy was brand new, that peg was a little thicker. They fit a little more securely, but as I handle this thing more and more, I am able to unhinge those intakes, particularly when I have the super parts on the toy and I add a little bit more weight to the legs. That can be a problem. Now here was the version 1 toy, and there's that peg on top, but it's kind of a square peg. Here's that peg on the inside that I was pointing out they don't have anymore. Maybe they should. And then here's the little hook on the back, which now does much more work. So this just really never sat in there as firmly as it should. On this toy, it's in there for mild handling, but still extreme handling or like moving the legs without moving everything else. I can pop those free. So still not ideal, but improved. Quick note on the missiles. The version 1.0 missiles were this warm hue that didn't really go with the Fokker toy at all. The version 1.5 missiles, the same hue as the vehicle, and they look great. So not only are they not yanking your hard points off, they are actually looking better while they do it. You can see there's a better slope going on the Guardian mode on the version 1.5 toy. It is angled down further. That's because of those new reworked intake joints. So while the feet are new and open further, but they don't quite hold the toy up as well, you can still get the toy in this more angular slope. Flipping the toy over, we can take a look at this Garwalk joint here. So this joint now, smoother transition, comes further forward, all good stuff there. And then at the knee, we get something similar. And not only that, the knee has a pivot point within the thigh. So you now have a double knee, and I'll show you that more in Battloid mode. But that also lets you get a really extreme sweep on the legs. So big improvements there. Big improvements to Guardian mode. No longer is it kind of an afterthought. It is somewhat playable, though those feet were a little frustrating. Okay, let's continue on to Battloid. When you pull the toy out of the box, it's in Battloid mode. If you put it down next to a version 1 toy, the first thing you're going to notice is there is a size discrepancy. The version 1.5 toys are a little bit larger than their version 1 toys. Now it's close enough. If you put these in dynamic poses, you're probably not going to notice it. But if you have them standing somewhat stoically, you will see it. As you can see, it's a little bit large for 172 scale, but still smaller than the 160 scale, so it kind of works. There are a host of improvements as you start actually handling the toy. And just right off the bat, you'll see they used a new gold paint for these inset lights that looks a little bit better. It looks almost like clear plastic inserts. In fact, I thought it was for a little bit, but it's just gold paint. Looks good up here. Then you have this new chest hinge. And what that chest hinge allows you to do, we can slide this chest forward. So this is how your width of the hinge would be on the version 1 toy. And on this toy, we can actually pull everything tighter. Because of that, your cavity fillers on the side that you can see I'm using right now are a little bit different shape. They're a little narrower because they don't have to be as wide because that chest comes back. Now that chest coming back also solves one of my initial complaints with this version 1 toy, in that the chest seemed to be free floating. The chest on this toy, much stiffer. That's pretty much locked on there without actually being locked on like it is on an Arcadia toy. So that's certainly an improvement. The bigger improvements are with articulation. So we have the shoulder here. You can see there's a notch in it. And what that does is it allows the arm to come out further away from the body. So big improvement there. But this is where things get downright nutty. You can take this shoulder and bring it up. This is the only VF1 toy I have ever seen that can pull off this articulation. You can't do anything like that here. Here you just have a ball joint that's coming out. If you want to bring the arm up, you spin it around so the shoulder is pointing down. Look at what this toy is doing. That is just crazy articulation. That's not even something you see on Bandai's DX line of toys. Now they haven't changed anything else. You got the twist, you have the elbow joint that allows 90 degrees, or I'm sorry, more like 180 degrees. So that's all good, but that is insane. Then you have that gear walk hinge that lets you bring the arm forward. So that, in combination with the fact that you can bring the arm out more, lets you bring the arm forward in such a way that you have even more reach than you've ever had before. So crazy arm articulation, very impressive stuff there. The other thing on the version 1 toys, the arm joint, this hinge right here, kind of tucks into the cavity filler. It just never felt very solid. Despite the fact they've added a hinge here and a lot more articulation, this joint feels more solid to me. So big improvements there. Another big improvement on this toy, you had a neck cavity filler that is a separate part. So this would plug in there. On the version 1.5 toy, they have copied the DX and they've integrated that cavity filler. So nice and tight from above. Big improvements on the upper body. We've lost a little intake cover. Let's move on and look at that lower body. Okay, so here we are looking at the waist. You could see, again, those bigger intakes and those thicker thighs, which really not too bad looking in Battloid mode. They were a little funky in Fighter, but here I think it's really pulling things off just fine. And yeah, it added to the height, but you saw that picture in the beginning with the Arcadia toy. The proportions still seem fine. Now we can look at what they've improved here. First, you might have noticed when I had the toy in Gearwalk mode, there's actually a waist. Now, unfortunately, this is like the waist that was on the Yamato 148 toy. When you have the legs connected, that waist doesn't really do more than a couple degrees of movement, but it's there. I think in reality, it's going to be more frustrating in Fighter and Gearwalk mode than it's going to be helpful in Battloid mode, but they did it. Did I call it Gearwalk or Guardian? Anyway, they did it. A for effort. We'll see if they can improve on that swing bar at some point to get you a little more range of motion back there without coming up with a disconnecting mechanism like we saw in the DX toys. Then we go down and they've implemented the DX toys extra joint below the Gearwalk, or Guardian, I'm using Robotech terms here, they've added that outward sweep joint. So you can get a super wide stance. Now, it doesn't sweep out as far as a Bandai DX toy does, but you do get a little angle out of it, and that's nice. Then we have the improved gear walk joint, and that's the second time that thing's popped out, so clearly that could be in there a little stiffer. We have that gear walk joint, which has been revised. It's smoother, it goes a little further. But then things get really interesting, because where this toy, let's start with the base. This toy, there goes the pilot. That should never happen. This toy has a gear walk joint that does come down. It's fine. It's not really as tight as we have on the new toy. It does not have the ability to angle outward. You get to the knee and you can extend it. You can come back 90 degrees. That's all you can really do there. But then this toy, which you can see is holding together much better, added a joint inside the thigh. So now you can bring the knee back that far. We can extend it and we can bring it back that far. And if I close up the gear walk joint, you can see that I am getting a huge range of motion out of the knee. This is something that even Arcadia and the Bandai DX toy don't compete with. So huzzah there. And then we showed you the feet. You can't twist them, but you can bend them in and out a little bit, and they rock smoothly forward and back. So in Battloid mode, you do get a lot of mileage out of that. There are no changes I can see to the fixed post hands, gun strap, calves, forearms, or backpacks, so fast packs released previously still work. To summarize, this is a huge improvement over the first toy. Version 1.0 looked pretty good, but it borrowed from numerous other releases and managed to be less than the sum of its parts. With the improvements here, we see some more borrowing and some ingenuity that makes for an incredibly dynamic Battloid and good enough fighter and Guardian modes. Extending the comparison beyond KitzConcept toys, this toy can't really compete with the build quality and smoothness or solidity of Bandai's DX or Arcadia's 160 scale toys, but it does compete in articulation and looks. For the price, it's a lot of fun, and I hope KitzConcept keeps them coming and keeps making improvements along the way. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found my ramblings informative, subscribe to stay up to date, and check out the full article on anymoon.com. Thanks for watching.